Now, for more on that, we have with us Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
So let's start with the end of that report. Trump has said that he expects more meetings with Kim Jong-un in the future, and the report says, this is being seen as Trump trying to lower expectations over next week's summit, because that means there'll be more left to discuss. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I think so. We usually compare this meeting with what happened in the past between U.S. and North Korea. When you look through the meetings and agreements, we have seen very much detailed contents in the agreement, maybe in the Geneva Agreed Framework in 1994, and also in the process of six-part process. We see some of the September 19th, agreement, and also first phase and second phase agreement, which is October 3rd and February 13th agreements. They contained a very detailed, contents there about how to remove nuclear weapons and how to remove nuclear programs of North Korea completely, and in response, what kinds of energy assistance the U.S. and other parties are giving to North Korea. But this time, first meeting, Singapore meeting, it was very historical meeting between two leaders, very historical. So we didn't really care about the contents. But this time, second meeting, there should be very concrete and detailed, contents about how to denuclearize North Korea and what kind of corresponding measures will be given by the states to North Korea. So that's what people are expecting, comparing what happened in the past. But, when you look at some of these situations that, Kim Hyok-chol and Big-un is coming back to Hanoi again to narrow the gaps, finally trying to narrow the gaps, only have about 4 or 5 days to talk about. And maybe Trump thinks that the possibility to have a detailed agreement would be very low. So, he has to think about what will be the aftermath in the domestic United States politics, and maybe that's this kinds of comments that is to low expectations and trying to soothe and lower down the criticism from the domestics in the United States, I think.
Because if he suggests that they're going to have more talks again, do we expect again within this year another round of talks with Kim Jong-un this year?
I don't know. I think this time it depends upon what kinds of progress in the working level would evolve in the future. Maybe after the summit meetings, two countries would also talk about the specifics and details about denuclearization. Steve Big-un and Kim Hyok-chol might get together and talk about it, and also there might be several other summits. For example, Kim Jong-un's possible visit to Seoul, maybe sometime in March, hopefully. And in May, if President Trump visits Japan, he might come to Seoul and have a summit meeting with President Moon Jae-in. So these series of events would cover the first half of this year. So maybe afterwards, if things go okay in the working level discussions and some of the possible implementations, maybe possibly end of this year or early next year, we can have third summit meeting. And we have to make, also take note that President Trump wants to use it for the re-election campaign, which begins early next year.
Trump also said that although he would love to lift sanctions on North Korea, but then that North Korea has to do something meaningful. That's in quotes. I mean, what does that mean, something meaningful? And how do you think Kim will respond?
In the Pyongyang agreement and declaration, common declaration, joint declaration between Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un, it stipulated that North Korea would dismantle and destroy the Dongchang, the missile test sites, and also Yongbyon facilities if there are some corresponding measures by the United States. But the U.S. wants declaration and verification. That's some of the important measures that the U.S. wants. That has been stipulated in the speech by Stephen Big-un at Stanford, the speech at Stanford. It clarified that, comprehensive declaration and roadmap of declaration should be agreed between two countries, and also inspection and verification in Yongbyon facilities and beyond should be something that should be agreed between two countries. When you look at the six-party process, they have agreed upon declaration, but implementation of declaring all the nuclear programs in North Korea was not successful because of North Korea's rejection. But at least in six-party process, declaration was agreed in the agreement. So I think at least there should be an agreement about how to declare North Korean nuclear programs. I think that's the basis we can come up with the level that they have agreed in the six-party process. And I think that's something the U.S. wants as a substantial denuclearization measures of North Korea.
But the chances of getting those kind of substantial denuclearization measures seem slim, and Trump also seems to be lowering expectations with some of his comments about what we're going to get from the summit. The report actually says that perhaps we should be looking more towards they might just settle for a nuclear freeze. Does that sound like something that they might just settle for now?
Yes, I think so. But I think North Korea might do more than just freezing nuclear production. Yes, in the speech, New Year's speech, Kim Jong-un mentioned that he will also stop producing nuclear capabilities. But I think this time Kim Jong-un might want to do more, which, for example, destroying and dismantling some of the facilities of nuclear facilities, for example, Yongbyon facilities. That's what he has mentioned, if there are some corresponding measures. So even though what U.S. demands, for example, declaration and inspection and verification, even though those things might not be, included in the agreement, some kinds of smaller deal possibility between two countries, I think are still, possible. For example, some very light sanction lifting by the United States, and without verification, just destroying and dismantling Yongbyon facilities, I think that kind of small deal might be possible.
You've mentioned that the officials, Stephen Biegun and Kim Hyuk-chul, are meeting in Hanoi this week and for the last few days to finalize the details. But you've also mentioned how difficult agreeing these terms are. And there's some reports that are saying it's going to be up to the leaders, President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, who will be making the final decisions, and the draft for the agreement will be made literally on the day during the meeting. Do you think that could be a possibility? Is the work that the officials are doing right now in Hanoi more just groundwork for the actual meeting itself?
Yes, I think Kim Hyuk-chul and Biegun might come together and narrow the gap. I think they have some kinds of draft agreement with a lot of blanks, I think, and they might want to just fill in the blanks. But still, I think before the summit comes up, there might be several blanks that is still not filled in, which should be filled in by President Trump and Kim Jong-un. If the two leaders cannot agree on what to fill in in the blanks, I think those blanks will be just erased. It would not be included in the agreement at all, which means that the agreement this time will be, again, very haphazard, principle-based agreement, which is not about a detailed agreement about denuclearization. But still, I think that's the process, and there are some portions that two leaders have to do. I'm not sure how much they will come up with, because Trump mentioned several times, and this time again, that he would maintain the sanctions on North Korea. He would like to lift sanctions, but there should be some measures done by North Korea in order for sanctions to be lifted. So I think that's the focal point. They have to talk, but we'll see how it goes.
Trump has said the U.S. will keep sanctions on North Korea. But what's interesting as well was actually South Korea's President Moon Jae-in. He phoned Trump earlier this week and said South Korea is ready and willing to continue to expand into Korean cooperation as a way to encourage North Korea to denuclearize. Now, they mentioned various economic projects such as the rail and road reconnection project, and in the past, they've also been mentioned of the Kaesong Industrial Complex. But perhaps it's the Mount Kumgang Tour project that would be the most easy item they can discuss to restart again. Or what do you think about that?
Yes, I think President Moon Jae-in wants to, kind of expedite this process. You mean he wants to expedite the North-South detente and economic cooperation, but in order for that, there should be some sanctions lifted. And some of the issues that is not related to the United Nations sanctions, but still some kinds of initial steps for the North-South economic cooperation is you said right that it's Kumgang Mountain tourism. Chinese tourist companies, they bring people to North Korea for tourism, which is not the violation of United Nations sanctions. So if some, for example, Hyundai Asan companies, which is in charge of, mounting Kumgang tourism again, possibly, is not giving something to North Korea in a bulk cash form or something, which is violating United Nations sanctions, but operate the tourism as the way that other tourist companies do, I think that would be no problem. That would be not violating the United sanctions. But I think that would be very important first step for a possible economic cooperation between North and South Koreas.
Now let's look ahead to some of the details that are coming up next week. For example, we know the summit's going to happen next week, 27th, 28th they've announced, but the summit venue still hasn't really been confirmed. We know it's in Hanoi, but there are various sites that they're looking at. But one of the top locations they discussed was the National Convention Center, but that has now been reportedly rejected by North Korean officials as well, citing safety reasons. Now, how important is safety for North Korea during this trip?
It is the safety of Kim Jong-un is very important for his trip. Last Singapore meeting, out of 180 people, which is North Korean, delegates numbers, 100 people were in charge of guarding Kim Jong-un. So more than half of people were, for the purpose of, guarding Kim Jong-un. That's safety for the safety of Kim Jong-un. And this time, I think it's more days. I think, if they begin the summit 27th, Kim Jong-un would fly in or, arrive in Hanoi 26th, have a summit meeting 27th, 28th. And 29 and 30 possibly have a bilateral meeting with Vietnamese leader and have some, just investigation, some other, economic zone and stuff. So I think he would be in Hanoi or Vietnam at least for 4 days, 3 or 4 days at least, which is a very, long period of time. So I think this time, protocol and guard issues would be more important than Singapore. And you mentioned it right that the place for the meeting, I think, and also what kinds of transportation he's using, all that kind of things will be very important this time, more important than Singapore meeting.
Very briefly, one more question I want to ask. CNN is reporting now that the U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton is set to visit Seoul this week. Why do you think he's visiting?
I think this is for the purpose of tuning. At the final meeting, time with Korean government. I think the U.S. is ready for what kinds of boundaries and zone of negotiation it would have when it talks with Kim Jong-un and North Korean delegates. So I think before they come up with negotiation with North Korea, I think the final tuning with Korean government. That's I think the purpose.
Well, we'll have to wrap it up there. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much.